Association for Women in Communications program. Thanks for joining us. Looks like we have a pretty good group today. People are still joining, so I'm going to give everyone just one more minute to jump on and then we'll get started. Okay, looks like we've got everyone in the room now. So I wanted to say thanks for coming. And we got more people coming. So I just want to run through a couple of housekeeping items before I turn it over to Rikeesha. So Rikeesha is our guest speaker today, but a couple of notes. So currently, the Association for Women in Communications is offering a membership drive from both the national level, and then we have also tagged on our local chapter dues being waived. So right now, if you join before the end of October, as a member, you get a discount of like $75. So it's pretty rare that both of those things collide and offer you that kind of discount. So I want to say welcome to our new members, Veronica Brown, Rachel Clark, Hillary Patterson, and then also Melissa Hahn recently rejoined. I know Melissa has been a member for many years before, so thanks for joining us back. So like I said, we're going to put the link in the chat later in the meeting for the membership drive, but if you're interested, that is available. It's a pretty good discount right now of $75 off your dues. So if you need help with that or have any questions, our membership team is on the call too. So you could directly programs at AWC could probably get you to the right person. If you have any questions, just put it in the chat. So other than that, I think everybody should stay on mute. Rikeesha's going to open it up a couple of times for questions. If you have a question at that point, you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask her the question, but otherwise we'll keep everyone on mute while she's talking. So Rikeesha Phelon developed her strategic skill through senior communications positions in nonprofit management, governmental leadership, and political campaigns. Setting the foundation for her career, she earned a bachelor's degree in political science and then also a master's degree from UIS. I know we have some UIS folks on the call. Shout out to you. During that time, she worked as a graduate assistant at Illinois Issues magazine. She sharpened her skill and expertise as a nonprofit media director, public information officer for the Department of Human Services, and later as senior communications manager for all Illinois agency media relations. So in 2009, she worked for, I think, Senate President John Cullerton as the nation turned its attention to the Illinois Senate for impeachment trial of Rod Blagojevich. I'm sure that was exciting. During the 2014 Illinois governor's race, she served as campaign spokesperson and consultant for the Democratic Governors Association. She later returned to the Senate to have 7 more years as press secretary. So she left government a while ago to become an entrepreneur in the communications space, partnering with issue coalitions, corporations, and nonprofits to execute strategies that engage audiences, inspire action, and create change. Currently, she's the director of marketing communications at SIU Medicine and SIU School of Medicine, where I actually have the pleasure of working with this wonderful woman every single day. So I want to say welcome to Rikeesha Phelon and thank you for joining us today. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks, everybody. I see lots of friendly faces in this list, so that's kind of fun to see. Hi, Randy. Hi, everybody I really know from the community and work in communication. Some real pros are actually on the call today, so it's lovely that you're here. Also, I'm going to be on my best behavior so that I don't in any way let you down. One of the things that really I've learned to do in marketing and communications, political communications and PR, is that it's really about the art of lowering expectations. Giving a talk on how to give a good talk is really the opposite of that. The expectations are really high. So thank you for bearing with me through this. It is one of my favorite things to talk about. And one of my favorite things to do is to coach and to train on presentation skills and message management and how to get your big idea not only accepted, but acted on. So let me just start with that, giving a talk about how to give a good talk. Stakes are high. Give me some grace. Housekeeping, I am at home like many of you, so strange things will happen around me every once in a while. Random children will walk behind me. You will hear the doorbell. You will hear all the things that are in your home or in my home. So thank you for the grace of letting me get through this and pretending like it's super professional and you see and hear nothing else. So thank you for that. So why are we talking about this? Here's the thing. Because the world has been exposed to TED Talks with its very specific format and very specific goals and delivery style, that means the world has been exposed to good presentation skills. And they are no longer tolerant of a bad speech, of a bad presentation, of honestly, of their time being wasted in an exercise in narcissism when it comes to speech making or speech giving or your pitch or your presentation. TED has ruined that for all of us. Their 1 billion view in the world. TED Talks are hosted in 144 or 145 countries in the world. Every 17 seconds, there's a new page view. It's in 90 languages. It's gone worldwide. So I make that point not just to say that TED's a big deal, but it really has changed the way we think about how to share ideas, how to present our ideas, how to pitch, how to speak in public. And it's made everything a little bit harder because people just are not tolerated of your 44-minute speech about something that they don't care about. They understand the structure of TED. They understand how concise it is. They understand the completeness of it. The structure is pretty simple. One idea, 3 parts, what we all learned in 5th grade, an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, and 18 minutes. And it's really that structure that has worked for not only TED, but it works for our brains. It's short enough, it's complete enough, that you could really drive home a point without a lot of other fluff and a lot of other things that we're used to adding into our speeches and into our presentation. So I want to talk today about the structure of TED, not assuming that you all want to be on the TED stage, maybe you do. But I think the structure works for public speaking in general. And even if you have never thought that you wanted to be a master in public communications, you certainly have had the opportunity to present an idea to your boss, to speak in front of a committee, to talk to a reporter. There are many, many, many ways that you would benefit from learning from the TED structure, because I think it works in a lot of different scenarios. So hopefully this is not just some grandiose exercise in how to get you ready for something that may or may not happen in terms of you're actually being on a TED stage, but I'm hoping that what you walk away with are some key principles on structure and engagement that can help you in your next talk. I'm going to assume that most of you, because this is a communications group, have had for some time assumed that you would be working in communications. I have had that my entire life. I didn't know how I was going to use it. I didn't know if I was going to be, here were the things, okay? I didn't know if I was going to be a lawyer. I thought about running for office. And I thought, actually, I spent a lot of time thinking about being a minister. There's a through line in all of those specific professions, and that is the ability to clearly communicate a message in the way that engages audiences, and if you're lucky, changes the world, right? or changes the workplace, or changes a community. That's the through line in all of those ways that I was thinking about what I would be when I grew up. I knew that clear communication, clarity in communication and engagement was going to be my thing. And that's why I love this opportunity. And that's why I love the TED structure, because I think it gives a new formula for how to do that. So let's just get into that. So everyone wants to be better at their public speaking. Everyone wants to change the world. Everyone wants to engage a new audience. And the thing about TED is that it's all about the sharing of an idea. Their whole tagline is ideas worth spreading. How do you know if you have an idea worth spreading? And that's what we're going to focus on today. I like to break this conversation up into 3 sections. One is ideation. What's the big idea? And then we'd like to talk about narration, and we'd also like to talk about connection. And I'm actually just going to share my screen just for some ease for some of you as I'm going through these things, because there's a lot of material, and I just want to make sure that I'm punctuating some things for you as we move on. Hopefully you can all see this screen. So one of the things that I want to, again, underscore, the actual TED format, one big idea. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this. One big idea. And then 3 parts. We're not going to spend a ton of time talking about that because you guys know how that structure goes, in 18 minutes. That's the general structure for a talk, but I want to break it down into these 3 sections: ideation, connection, and narration. So let's start with ideation. Here's my thing. We do not spend enough time thinking about what the big idea is. Here's what we do. We think, okay, I've been given this topic to talk about, or I have this title. Those are 2 things that are really important in how you structure your speech or how you structure your presentation. But what we don't spend enough time talking about is how we develop our one big idea. It is the secret sauce of TED Talks. It's not just that they have a topic or they have a title and they're getting up and they're just talking in general about that topic or that title. There's a big idea that they're presenting. That's why it's ideas worth spreading. So let's spend a few minutes talking about ideation and what that means and how you can make sure you're fully developing the big idea for your next presentation, not just your topic. So one of the things that you can do in terms of thinking about the big idea is making sure that you're thinking about what the audience needs. So you can think, okay, I've got a title, I've got a topic. What's the idea that I want to make sure I'm delivering fully to the audience that meets their specific needs? You will hear this over and over again from me, regardless of how we're talking about this. Audience is king. So in every TED Talk, there's a big idea, and don't get overwhelmed about that in terms of what the big idea is. It can be a simple how-to. It can be an insight through a story. It can be a solution to a common problem. So I'm not saying you need to go out and invent something and say, here's my huge light bulb moment, here's my big idea. If it's an idea that serves the audience, it presents something that is new, something surprising, something that is maybe an old idea in a new light, or my favorite, a challenge to a commonly held belief. Those are all big ideas that can really drive a good presentation. Is it new? Is it surprising? Is it an old idea in a new light? Or is it a challenge to a commonly held belief? So you want to spend some time thinking not just about the topic, but the big idea. And those are a couple of questions you can ask yourself so that you can investigate whether or not it's an idea worth spreading. Is it new? Is it surprising? Is it in a new light? Does it challenge a common belief? Some extra metrics or exercises that you can go through in ideation, again, we don't spend enough time on this, is making sure that the idea is actually interesting. It is possible that you come up with a topic or an idea and it's new and surprising and a new light and it challenges a common belief, but it might not be interesting when you think about it from an audience perspective. And it might not be practical. So those are some extra ways that as you're investigating, do I have an idea worth spreading? True, new, surprising, new light, a challenge, but also it needs to be interesting. You maybe should not be the judge of that. Maybe you can let others be the judge of that. Maybe ask your husband or your girlfriend or someone who will tell you the truth. And it obviously needs to be something that's practical when you think about how does this idea serve my audience. So here's some examples of the big idea and some commonly known TED Talks. So Amy Cuddy is famous for her TED Talk. She's a Harvard University professor that studies body language, and her title was Your Body Language Can Shape Who You Are. The big idea, which is different from the title, the big idea was that body language changes how we see ourselves. You may have seen her talk. She's the one that talked about power posing, which when you look at it, even when you watch the TED Talk, it looks super hokey. I think it works though. It's that idea that you can go to, before you go into an interview or before you go into a big speech or before you're getting ready to do something big, you need to do something with your body so that you kind of feel bigger and more confident. So she talks about like this power posing and the Wonder Woman pose and all these things you do with your body that changes your perception of who you are. That was her big idea, and it went around the world. Some of my other favorites, Sir Ken Robinson, his title was Do Schools Kill Creativity? The big idea was this idea that we don't necessarily grow in creativity. Something happens to us where the creativity that we have when we're children actually gets drained from us through the public school system. It's the reverse in an idea that we normally think about. We think about going to school to acquire skills and to grow. And he makes an opposite argument that actually going to school might actually drain us of creativity. That's a big idea. Sir Simon Sinek's different kind of golden circle talk has gone around the world. This is one of the ones that I have found most useful as a leader. The title, and keep notice that I am distinguishing between titles and ideas. The title was How Leaders Inspire Action. The big idea was that inspirational leaders start with why. They don't start with what are we doing or how we're doing it. They always start with the very center, and that is why are we doing it? I use that in business all the time. Ask Sarah, ask anyone on my team. I use this all the time. So those are just some examples of titles versus big ideas. And we just need to spend more time with our big idea when we're getting ready to think about doing a TED Talk or a TED style presentation. One other thing in terms of ideation and the big idea is, and this is central to all TED Talks, you need to have a through line. So a through line is simply the way that you connect your big idea throughout the content of your speech so that it keeps emerging through stories and data points and illustrations and your own personal experiences. But there's one big idea. The challenge that TED offers to people is, can you thread that idea throughout the entire presentation? So it's not just something that you maybe say at the beginning and say, in conclusion, I want to restate my beginning, but you have figured out a way to thoughtfully weave that big idea throughout the entire presentation. That's a through line. You see it in movies, you see it in plays. You should see it when you're presenting a big idea. We need to spend more time on ideation. We need to spend more time on this big idea. And you know that you have a talk worth delivering, an idea worth sharing, where you've got a big idea that offers that challenge, that opens up the world for people, but also you can weave it through the entire presentation. It's also an exercise in clarity, because if you have stray points and stray stories that really don't there's no way to thread through that big idea, it probably means it shouldn't be in your presentation. So that's a really helpful but really important part of TED Talks, is you've got to have a big idea, but you've got to have a through line that's threaded through the entire thing. It's a connecting theme. So that is ideation. Spend more time, not just on the topic, not just on the title, but what's the big new idea that you want to present in your talk. let me, before we actually go on any further, just pause to make sure that there are no questions that you have about the big idea or ideation before we move on. Feel free to put something in the chat. I'm sure Sarah Kincaid can help me monitor that. But before I move on, are there any questions about the big idea? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. We're going to talk about connection. So I think when most people think about connection, this is where people get nervous, right? Because it's very much about how am I going to connect with the people in front of me. And if you're already nervous, the idea that you need to have some intentionality with actually connecting heart to heart or mind to mind with someone can be really intimidating. I used to teach speech for a junior college and loved it, loved teaching speech. But when you've got a room full of college sophomores and freshmen, and you're teaching speech and you're teaching them about connection, it usually ends up in the textbooks being just some weird section on eye contact. And so undoubtedly, on the day that someone was supposed to give their speech or the class was supposed to give their speech, I would, position myself in the center of the room. One by one, they'd file to the front and deliver their speech. And I've got my scorecards and my notes. And you can tell that they were remembering that they were being graded on eye contact or connection. Because at some point, there would just be in the middle of like them sputtering through their speech, bless their hearts, doing the best they can, sputtering through their speech, just kind of going through it, stumbling over things. At some point, they would just look up and give me this like cold, hard, weird, awkward stare. Why? Because they were told they needed to connect with their audience, and that's the method that they were given, is that you have to use eye contact. I think it's so much bigger than eye contact. And by the way, your speech teacher was never more uncomfortable than that moment when you gave her that awkward eye contact. It's not about that. Connection is so much bigger than that. Connection is actually one of the ways that I like to talk about it is be passionate, be authentic, be generous, be personal. Be passionate, authentic, be generous, and personal. These are the ways that your audience wants to connect with you. So, passion. To engage your listener, to really, really connect with your listener, you really do need to deliver your speech, not just from content on a page. It really needs to be something you're passionate about. Now, that is hard when it's an assignment. It is hard where it's a business presentation, but you got to do your work to figure out what piece of it you're passionate about. Because if you can't deliver it with passion, it is almost impossible for the audience to connect with you. Find your passion, even if it's just one piece of it. Make sure you serve it up on a platter and you figure out a way to weave that particular point through the entire presentation, because connection is important and you've got to be passionate about what you're delivering. The second thing is being authentic. Now, this is an overused phrase, okay? And what we're getting from all of this direction, from all the people in our lives and all of the books that are lining our shelves that are self-help with this be authentic is be vulnerable. And that is true. You have to do that. But watch out for any sort of weird canned vulnerability or feigned or inauthentic vulnerability where you're maybe just kind of trying to manipulate the audience. Listen, we know when you're being fake, even if we don't know you. We know when you're being fake. So be authentic, be real. Don't try to sound like someone else, but please, please, please don't fake vulnerability. If it's not there, it's not there. But be authentic. We're not all going to sound like Martin Luther King Jr. or JFK or Barack Obama when we give our speeches. Figure out what your voice is, what's true for you, what's authentic for you, and that's what you need to deliver. An audience will not connect with the fake. It has to be you. The third thing on connection is be generous. This is my favorite point. When you stand in front of an audience to give them a presentation, you need to give them everything you've got. You need to leave nothing behind. They are giving you their time. And now more than ever, that is the most precious commodity that anybody can give you. So when they give you their attention, be mindful of that and be as generous as you can with your wisdom. Give them everything you got. You want to build connection with your audience, make sure they feel like you're giving them everything you got. Do not take the stage as an exercise in narcissism because you want attention, you want recognition, you want accolades. We see that. We hate that. Take the stage because you have something that you want to give to the audience, an idea that will change their life, a lesson that will help them, a tool that will help them get through these days. But don't take the stage just to take their time and just to meet your own needs. Do it because you want to be generous with your ideas and you want to help people. Be personable. Just figure out a way to be conversational in your language. I have a prepared speech right now. I've given it a few times, so I know it pretty well, but I am trying my hardest, even though I'm looking at blank screens and just names. I am trying my hardest to connect with you as a person, as an individual, so that you feel like there's a human being talking to you and not just a talking head. Be personal. So it's really, really simple. I think some of my favorite TED Talks that do a good job of connection, my most recent favorite is Kate Bowler's talk. And if you haven't seen it, please do watch it, particularly if you've had a difficult season of trauma or death or health issues, where I guess that's all of us right now, actually, that's all of us right now. Kate gives this really good talk, and the title of it is Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies That I Have Loved. So automatically you know that her big idea is to challenge a commonly held assumption that many of us, regardless of our faith background, it's kind of an American thing, that everything happens for a reason. It will all work out. It was all supposed to be this way. And so because of her own cancer struggle, she totally turns that principle on its head. And she does it with such vulnerability and openness. She shares her pain, she shares her heartbreak and her hope, but she is using that opportunity to generously give from her personal story in a really authentic and passionate way. And she connects with the audience. If you have not seen that talk, it's certainly worth taking a look at, because she goes through how her experience actually challenged all of her notions about faith, about American prosperity gospel and fundamentalism, and it changed her world. So do check that out. So that is connection. Be personable, be passionate, be authentic, and be generous. Most of all, just be you, because we can spot us fake the moment you walk on the stage, actually. So do your best to be you, your best self, by the way. Let me pause here and ask if there are any questions or thoughts before I move on to the next section on narration.
Rikeesha, I did put that in the chat. I found that video that you were just talking about, so I put it in the chat for everyone.
Awesome.
No questions in the chat, though.
Okay, great. All right, then I'm going to keep going. Okay, so we talked about ideation, spend more time on the big idea, and then make sure you're threading it through the entire presentation. The second was connection. Be personable, be passionate, be authentic, be generous, be real, be you. And now we're going to talk about narration, otherwise known as storytelling. Human beings understand and interpret the world around them through storytelling. We see the world in stories. We understand our life through the stories and the memories that we have. Stories are designed for engagement. So narration and storytelling is a huge part of any TED Talk. You have to tell a story. You're not getting on that stage without telling us. Allow you to kind of recreate ideas in the minds of the listener. Literally, there's one TED Talk expert that talks about how you get on that stage, and your job is to recreate a story in the mind of the listener. And when you can do that, you've got engagement, you've got action, you've got support. But that's what the power of stories are. So what are the elements of story? Narration, there has to be a point, of course, to your story. So there needs to be a core message or a lesson that's connected to that big idea. Narration has clear points and supporting details that add color. Think about telling a story and adding all of the detail and all of the color and all of the description that you can. Narrative drama, when you're telling a story, the more you can kind of recount even some of the dialogues that are in your head, the dialogue that you're having with people, that's an easy way to add color and drama to a story that you're telling and part of your narration. And then also just keep in mind that, the job really is to tell a story that has enough emotion in it that your audience can connect to. That doesn't necessarily mean emotion as in tell me a story and we're all going to cry together. Laughter is emotion, and humor really works. Funny stories are one of the easiest ways to connect. But if you have something that's a tearjerker, fine, as long as it fits with the idea, as long as it serves the audience, and as long as you can keep it in 18 minutes, which is usually a bigger challenge than people want to realize. Listen, brain scans tell us that stories stimulate and engage the human brain. It helps the speaker to connect with the audience in a way that's just much more powerful than if you were to give them a set of data points. It just does the job. A good example of this, I was reading about Sheryl Sandberg's first TED Talk, which is, again, gone around the world. And before she wrote her book, Lean In, she was going to talk about some gender issues in her TED Talk. And she prepared her entire presentation, and it was going to be chock full of facts and stats. She scrapped it at the last minute and decided that she was going to take that stage and she was going to tell 3 powerful stories about women and what it's like to lead and what it's like to be in a high stakes environment. And that approach actually changed her life, rocked the world. And how many of you have either read Lean In or about Lean In? There's a reason that we no longer tell our little girls that they're bossy, right? Because of this story. And it all started with a TED Talk where she decided that she wanted to tell stories rather than just simply offer data points to her audience. It's powerful. Stories are that powerful. Stories are often, I want to be honest with you, the hardest part for me to personally do. I am by nature a very private person. I also am not the most self-aware person, to be honest. And anybody who knows me well knows that this is true. I'm thinking about you. I'm thinking about my team. I'm thinking about my family. I'm not often paying attention to myself. So if you're like that, if you're built like me, it's hard to kind of dig up those stories of relevance that you actually want to share with people. I have found out, though, that I am very, very good at getting other people to tell their stories. So that's where I try to make my money, because I'm just really pretty terrible at telling my own. But, I continue to do a lot of coaching, public officials, C-suite leaders that have a big presentation to make or a big announcement to make, lots of political candidates as they get ready for office. And my favorite part is thinking about that kind of announcement, stump speech opportunity, and not just for political candidates, but for any new leader. How are they going to tell their story? How are they going to introduce themselves to the world? I was working with a candidate in Chicago, and a very high-powered person who was well-known, already had a political office and was thinking about something higher. And, she just wanted to kind of put together this speech, which was all of her accomplishments. I've done this, and I've done this, and I've done this, and I've done this. And yeah. You did all of those things. Tell me, my favorite question is, tell me about you in college. Tell me about you in high school. So she tells me this story about how she put herself through college at the U of I. She lived in Chicago. She would drive down to the U of I. She'd stay there, and then she'd come back. And on the weekends and on holidays, she worked in the Martinique, which is this huge banquet area in the Chicago area where people had weddings and things. And she talked about bussing tables, and she talked about what it was like to do that when all of her friends were kind of partying over the weekend, driving back up to Chicago. and talking about waiting tables and cleaning up after drunk wedding guests. And I said, stop right there. That's the story we're leading with, because it humanized her. It brought a point of human connection. I love mining out those stories. Narration is possible. It's an amazing way to connect with people. I remember talking to another client in Chicago, and he runs a large private school in Chicago, and was having a little bit of trouble connecting with parents when he would do this presentation about what it's like to come to the school. But in the course of getting to know him, he told me about what it was like when he got offered the job to come to that school. And he told me this adorable story about how he came in for the interview, and his wife and his daughters were in a pancake restaurant across the street. So he went in from the interview, and he knew he nailed the interview, and he walked out that door, and he kind of skipped across the street there's a little bit of a skip in his step, because he was excited about the fact that he nailed that interview, and he knew that this was going to be his school. So he walks over to this pancake restaurant, and he's got this big smile on his face, and his wife immediately knows that he got the job. And I said, no, why don't you just take that story? Think about what it's like to be a new student coming to this school. Think about how hard it is to get into the school and the excitement that they feel. You can identify with those students who have this excitement and anticipation about coming to this school, because that is exactly how you felt when you got the job. And so he's like, it just was like something he'd never thought about. That is the power of story. It offers you a way to tell a story. A way to connect. It offers you an opportunity to connect with your audience and to drive home a point in a way that a data point never will. Data points are good. I love them. You need them, but story is more powerful. So I want to tell you a little bit more about story. And this is a very, very important point. So usually try to think about 3 stories. They might be quick, they might be short, or just one big story is fine as long as it's significant. My most important point about this is, for those of you who are weirded out about why Yoda is on the screen, your audience is the hero. You are not the hero. This is a very, very popular communications strategy that lots of communications professionals, probably many of you, are familiar with. But the job that you have when giving a speech, when trying to engage, particularly if you're trying to be persuasive, is to position yourself as the guide and the mentor, and to position the audience as the hero. So when you think about the arc of normal stories, and there's lots of research out there about this, there's always kind of there's a setting, there's a main character, there's an exposition, there's a major conflict, there's some giant to slay, some war to fight, some girl to win. There's some sort of major goal that the main character have, and there's some sort of conflict or some sort of challenge that's preventing them from getting to their story. That's how stories are structured. That's Joseph Campbell. That's Nancy Duarte. But there's also always another character in these stories, and that character is the guide. That is the person that's centered in the story, that their responsibility is not to actually be the focus of the story. They're the best friend that's helping the main character get to their spot. It's the Viola Davis to the Julia Roberts and Eat, Pray, Love, right? It's Yoda in Star Wars to Luke Skywalker. It is Mr. Miyagi to Daniel in The Karate Kid. You are not the hero. When you are presenting an idea to serve and you're presenting a way to connect, one of the biggest mistakes people make is they make themselves the hero, and the audience is just sort of left thinking, where do I fit in this story? If you want to connect with audience, if you want to engage, if you want to change minds, you want to get people to follow you, people to lead, they need to think about you as the guide, and they need to be the hero. You are not Luke Skywalker. You are Yoda. And when you think about communicating, if you center the audience and make the audience a hero, then that changes everything. So then it's, what does the audience need? What are the audience's challenges? What do they have in front of them? What can I offer to help them slay their giants, cross that bridge, scale that mountain, whatever it is? if you will position yourself as the guide and not narcissistically center yourself as the hero, you will connect, you will have an idea worth spreading, and people will connect with you. This is a really hard thing for politicians because literally they're a hero, right? They literally are showing up to save the world and save the country and save the community, right? It's their name on the billboard. It's their name on the signs in the yard. So one of the biggest mistakes that they can make when they're doing their pitch is showing up at those doors and talking about how great they are. People don't care how great you are. Baby girl, this is not about you. What they need to hear is that you understand their challenges, you understand their needs, and you are there as a guide to help them get to where they want. You want people to vote for you, you make sure they understand that you're there to support them, their goals, their dreams, their passion. And this is not an exercise in narcissism. Same thing with public speaking. You want an idea to change the world, make sure that you are serving ideas to your audience that serves them, that centers them. You be the guide, let your audience drive the rest. So I don't know if you noticed, but there's a through line here. It's all about audience. The secret to a good TED Talk is not just the one big idea, 3 main points, 18 seconds, and it's not just ideation and connection and narration. It is 100% not about writing the best speech. It is about letting the audience drive your speech and your content. It's audience, 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 audience. And whenever you stray from that, or any particular part of your speech or your purpose starts to stray from that, then you know, well, let me get back. Let me get back. It's your audience. They're the ones that matter. They're the ones that you need to connect with. They should be writing your speech. Well, that's kind of the end of my TED Talk. I get a little preachy. Like I said, I did think about being a minister at one point. So if I got there a little bit, y'all have to forgive me. But I hope that you got the point. It really is about audience, ideas that serve them, ways that you connect with them, and narration and stories that really inspire their heroism and not yours. So if you are interested in any other resources around this or some of the things that I referenced, there's a million books out there now about TED Talks and the structure, and a few good ones. Chris Anderson's is good, Carmine Gallo. I love Nancy Duarte. She's my favorite. She doesn't necessarily talk about TED Talks specifically, but she has a few. And if you want to learn more about the power of story, particularly in terms of how you make sure that you're centering the audience, Nancy Duarte is my favorite. And then, of course, there is a TEDx Illustrator Speaker's Guide. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah. And Sarah, you can let me know if there are any other questions that are coming up.
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. We will share the recording of this on our members section. I believe, someone correct me on the board if I'm wrong. Also, I realized I didn't introduce myself because I was so nervous about introducing my boss on this call. So I didn't even introduce myself, but I'm Sarah Kincaid. I'm actually the board chair of AWC this year. So I want to say thank you for coming to everyone. We will put the recording on our website on we can drop it on the chat. There it is. So if you want to save that, if you would like to become a member, we put some stuff on there in the members only section, like a job board that, you know, we're all kind of in the same, you know, niche communications field in Springfield. So I feel like we're kind of one of the first places where openings come about, and we kind of hear about that stuff. So we try to post job postings on there on a private board for people who may need to network and that sort of thing. Looking for a move. So Rikeesha, I did see a question in here for you.
I see one about someone said they're having trouble visualizing a story where the audience is the hero. And it's more kind of a state of mind in terms of how you're preparing. If the focus of your content is about all of the things that you have done, and not all of the ways that the audience can have their dreams met and their goals fulfilled, that means that you're not really centering the audience, right? So the only place that it actually makes sense to do a whole lot of talk about all of the things that you have done and kind of make it super focused on you as the hero and as the one as if you're at a job interview. But I'll tell you, a good job interview, you might spend some time talking about who you are and all the things you can do. But if you want to get hired, you're going to talk about what you can do for that company. I mean, it's kind of basic sales, really. Really.
Any other questions? Guys, feel free to unmute yourself and ask it out loud if you'd rather do it that way. We're open to that. Otherwise, our next AWC session we're just going to keep doing these on Zoom probably throughout the winter. We want everyone to stay safe and healthy and not spread COVID. So we're going to keep doing this on Zoom. So November 12th is our next presentation. It will be about diversity in your communications. So if you're writing communications, which probably most of you are, you might want to join in and hear about how we can bring more diversity into our communications when we're considering that audience and how we're writing for them. So we'll have a speaker. Her name is Carla Karadridis. I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher that, but I looked it up even. So yeah, hopefully, I think there's a link in the chat for the next month. These are free, so you might as well join us on your lunch hour. Feel free to put your video off and eat your lunch while you're listening, or if you'd rather just get the recording afterwards, that's fine too.
Sarah, there was a question about practicing. Does Rikeesha practice her talks?
Oh, good question.
I absolutely do practice my talks. And I didn't talk about nerves or anything, because that wasn't really the point of this today. But even for people who don't have problems with nerves, absolutely practice. I practice often. I also record myself. Even today, even though I presented this a number of times, I still went through and recorded myself this morning, again, presenting this so I could hear it back and do some corrections just based on the audience, thinking about what you did. But yes, absolutely practice, 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 but also record yourself and be open to critiquing yourself. So yes.
All right. If no one has any other questions, we can end this early. Otherwise, Rikeesha, I appreciate your time and volunteering to do this for us.
I was voluntold.
I think you were voluntold, but you know.
But it was a pleasure.
But we appreciate your time. As you said, time is very expensive, right? So I do appreciate your time. I hope you guys got something out of this. I know that Rikeesha is well known in our community, so I appreciate her doing this for us. I learned some things. I always learn things from Rikeesha. She's a great resource. So yeah, thank you for everyone joining us, and we hope that you had a good time with us today.
Bye.
Bye.